This morning you've heard already a lot about some of the efforts that are ongoing, particularly in the government of Karnataka, towards suicide prevention. We all know that this is somewhat, this is not confined to our own state or our own country. It's a global problem because almost 800,000 people die each year from suicide. And therefore, to bring attention to this, while we talk about numbers, we know that Mrs. Maheshwar mentioned that about 1/8 of these, according to the NCRB data, occur from India. We also know that unfortunately this is a problem among young people, a growing problem among young people. We know that globally, although it is more young males who die by suicide, in India it is young females who die much more by suicide. We also know that it's more than just a issue of statistics. Earlier, as professionals, we used to come across our patients who might have attempted to die by suicide. But now, practically personally, all of us have heard about somebody within our own immediate circles who have died by suicide. So it's more than just a statistics, it's become a very personal and extremely distressful kind of situation. So the challenge is, how do you change the narrative? How do you convert this despair into hope so that people, for whatever reason, do not feel that death is the only answer? Of course, we all know that death is inevitable, but we also know that to die young, to be deprived of an opportunity for a rich and fulfilling life, is something that we must all make sure nobody considers that is an option. And that's why I think one of the things in terms of changing the narrative is really to denormalize suicide in our societies. Not to think of it as an option to be able to reduce our distress, to be able to get rid of our distress. And in that, we need to come together as a whole of society and make sure that we look at conveying a message to society that all lives are precious. Every single person's life needs to be considered as precious. Everybody needs to be respected for what they are and what they do. We also know that there are a whole lot of complex reasons for why people try to end their lives by suicide. We know that although one can't very easily hierarchize these kind of reasons, from financial distress to interpersonal difficulties, to illness, to academic problems, to life's problems, life situations, life events, to biological vulnerabilities, to pre-existing mental health disorder, to agrarian crisis. There will be several kinds of factors which come together. We also know now that while of course there has been an association with all kinds of socio-economic distress, we know now that suicides and deaths by suicide among young people in higher institutes of education is also increasing. So much so that the Supreme Court has set up a committee to actually investigate suicides in institutions of higher education. And Dr. Seema Mehrotra from NIMHANS is one of the members of this. And they are out to talk to everybody who's involved in higher education, whether it's students, whether it's teachers, whether it's policymakers, whether it's government, whether it's NGOs, to try and look at the reasons and to see how best we can, of course, not only address the risks for suicide, but also promote support amongst one another. I think social support, preventing social isolation and social alienation, addressing loneliness, which all of us know is considered a modern pandemic, becomes very important. So really to make sure that people do not look at this as the only resort, and to see that when all the doors seem closed, that at least there is a window of hope and a window of promise that comes through, is something that we all have a responsibility to ensure in society. When a person tries to take their life by suicide, the chance of repeating this is very, very high. And that eventually more than 10% of these individuals can actually die by suicide. And therefore it becomes important to provide them support. And I'm sure Dr. Anish will tell you in the course of today's deliberations how that figure it's been possible to bring it down to completely negligible figures by hand-holding such individuals, by helping them believe that there's somebody to offer them support and somebody to turn to and not feel helpless and hopeless. Helplessness and hopelessness are two very important indicators as to why people feel that there is no point in living. And that's very important, that even in the worst of crises, to suggest that there is a chance to come out of it is a very, very important message to convey to people. At the systemic level, Dr. Rajini mentioned the NIMHANS initiative, and every time on any podium, I always remind everybody about the number. It's 14416. It's a national helpline. It's considered the digital arm of the district mental health program. Every state and union territory has a NIMHANS cell where anybody can call and in their own language can receive support. And one of the successes of the NIMHANS cell has been when people call with a suicidal expression, an ideation, or at a risk for making an attempt, prompt help in terms of giving them psychological first aid, getting in touch with their family, getting in touch with the administration to make sure their health has really gone a long way. The other very important thing is also something that we need to talk about, which is media reporting of suicide. And I think that is something that we need to professionally train media in, not to sensationalize suicides, because you do know that when you sensationalize it, copycat suicides are something that is known to occur. So that's very important. The third and very important thing is also to reduce access to methods that can encourage people to end their lives by suicide. For example, access to pesticides is one very important thing. Dr. Gururaj has done a lot of work. He's on the panel later today. He's done a lot of work. And we need to make sure that we look at a lot of these kind of strategies so that the risk to end a life by suicide is minimized going forward. For young people, various programs at the national level. There is the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakrama. There is of course the district mental health program that Dr. Rajini mentioned. And of course, I think the most important message that all of us need to know is that suicide is eminently preventable. So like we look at other factors which have preventable options, suicide is certainly one of them. And addressing risk factors becomes a very, very important aspect of whatever we do. And in that, we need to make sure that we make suicide prevention a part of every kind of health initiative that we do. And basically, preventing suicide is by promoting mental health, is by promoting social well-being, is by making sure people know how to address their financial distress and are able to overcome it. And remember, substance use, behavioral addictions are also closely related to a risk to suicide. So a lot of other initiatives that we do are also very important. The mental health interventions that we undertake are also very critical. So I think the most important message that I'd like to leave you with is that we need to look at all these programs in complementarity. The entry point here might be suicide prevention, another entry point may be substance use, another entry point may be prevention of domestic violence or child mental health. But all of these are geared towards, to reduce the risk of any kind of mental distress, which might finally end in what we all hate to hear about, which is death by suicide. So again, I hope that this program today, which marks the 1 year of the N-SPRITE, and congratulations to the entire team,